All right, so we're gonna get going. Thank you all for joining us tonight. I'm Kevin Leja. I'm a member of Indivisible Bellingham, and I want to thank everybody, including our special guests, in alphabetical order: James Erb, Evan Jones, and Lisa Keeler, for joining us. I'd also like to remind you, everyone here, that next Monday, July 20th at 7 o'clock, we're having a candidate forum for Whatcom County Superior Court Judge Position 4. And that would be Superior Court Judge David Freeman, who's facing challengers Carl Munson, who's a Bellingham lawyer and a pro tem judge for Bellingham Municipal Court, and also Jim Nelson. So save the date. Next Monday, same time, same station, different judges, or different candidates, sorry. To begin, we at Indivisible Bellingham like to acknowledge that this beautiful land on which we live and which our collective ancestors claimed as their own is indeed traditional territory of the Lummi and Nooksack peoples. Their presence is imbued in every aspect of the natural land, and we want to recognize and nurture our relationship with our Coast Salish neighbors and shared responsibilities to their homelands where we all reside today. Indivisible Bellingham is united by the principles of fairness, inclusion, tolerance, and a just society for all through nonviolent civic engagement, political involvement, and consistent pressure on elected officials. That's our mission statement. I want to start out by making a couple of announcements. We have some actions. As a group, we've come to agree that Joan Baez's statement, "Activism is the antidote to despair," is something we can live by, definitely. In other words, stay active and beat depression. And so we're very, very active. In the last 3 years, almost 3 years, we've organized and co-sponsored numerous rallies and marches and political meetings, town halls, forums, and we've done a lot of the things that are in our mission statement. We have applied pressure to our elected officials to hold them accountable. Right now, we are using this election cycle to continue several actions that will help ensure larger voter turnout in swing states and districts. Research has shown that when people are encouraged by a friend or a peer to be more involved in the political process, it actually increases turnout. And this election cycle, Indivisible Bellingham has already sent out 4,000, almost 4,000 postcards across the country. And that deserves some applause. Our newest campaign is called Reclaim Our Vote, and we've chosen to work with the NAACP to reach out to voters in North Carolina. It's a battleground state. It's a very important down ballot race, many down ballot races this November. And Reclaim the Vote works with voters of color who have been disenfranchised, either through voter suppression efforts, including deregistration. There's a lot of that going on, not only in North Carolina, but all over the country. Closure of voting locations and misinformation about the voting process. So we have everything you need to help in this grassroots effort. You can contact us by writing to indivisiblebellingham@gmail.com. You can find all the links and information on our website, which is indivisiblebellingham.org, O-R-G. So these next couple of actions that I'm going to mention, definitely you can get more information about them from our website and also on our Facebook page. Some of you don't do Facebook, so our website has all the information right on the homepage. Just scroll down and you'll find it. We're also continuing with Postcards to Voters. It's a postcarding through this organization involves encouraging voters to register to vote by mail, VBM, and also Get Out the Vote, GOTV campaigns for specific elections. And we're also encouraging our members to, or anyone else who has some time to help out, to write letters in our Swing Left, Vote Forward effort. It is an effort by Move On and a couple of other organizations to send 10 million letters by November to voters across the country. In multiple randomized trials, voters who received a letter were significantly more likely to vote. And this is especially important for low propensity voters who we're trying to reach. Letters go into critically important states and you get to choose them. You get to choose where they go. You can find all the links again at indivisiblebellingham.org. And I've got two more reminders. Double check your voting status at votewa.gov. votewa.gov. Make sure that you're registered to vote and that your registration hasn't been thrown out for some reason. Also, don't forget to do the census. If you haven't filled out your census forms yet, get those done right now. So all of this work is pretty invigorating, but it also can be costly, and we'll take a moment to ask that if you can spare a donation of any size, we would really appreciate it. We accept donations via PayPal or Venmo, or if you're old school, and there ain't nothing wrong with that, you can send us a check to P.O. Box 29321, Bellingham 98228. We have to pay for room rental when we have meetings, postage, printings, and at times ads and ASL interpreters and sometimes police presence. So we really appreciate anything that you can help us out with. Okay, well, tonight's meeting, the format, tonight's meeting is being recorded. And if you know somebody that might be interested in this, a neighbor who might not have a real super fine interest like you do in the political process, but maybe wants to know a little bit more about the candidates for judge in position 2, we're going to have this recording on our Facebook page as well as our public website. We'll try and get it up sometime toward the end of this week. And from now on, any of the Zoom meetings that we record or any of the actual meetings when we can finally get back to meeting in person, the recordings will be posted on that page, and that'll be coming up real soon. We have curated questions for the candidates tonight, specifically on judicial improvement, social justice, bias, the jail and alternatives to the jail, bail, and the mental health court. But if there's time, we will take questions from you. If you have a question, open your chat feature and type in your question, and one of our members will capture that and get it to me toward the end of the curated questions. So if, without further ado, I think I'd like to introduce the candidates, and if you can give us an overview of your background and experience, including the factors that led you to run for the bench. We'd appreciate that. We're also asking the candidates to give us 2 or 3 specific qualities that make them particularly well suited for the judicial position, and that possibly distinguish you from your opponents. But we'd like you to focus on the positive differences rather than speaking to what you perceive as your opponent's possible weaknesses. So without further ado, we're going to take you alphabetically. So James, you're going to be going first, and I will tell you that what we'll do is we'll sort of rotate the first person who answers every question. So it won't be James. The next time it will be Evan, and the next time after that it will be Lisa, and then we'll keep doing that as we go through the questions. Do any of the candidates have any questions before we get going? No? Okay. Well then, James, if you could give us your background, experience, and why you're running for this position.
Sure. And is it 2 minutes?
You got 3 minutes.
3 minutes. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you. So thank you everybody for being here this evening. Thank you to Indivisible Bellingham for organizing this candidates forum. While this may be a down ballot race, it is incredibly important for our community. Superior Court judges here in Whatcom County make decisions in the courtroom every day that affect the lives of our family members, our friends, and our neighbors here in Whatcom County. And this is a great community that we all share and call home. My wife Heather and I relocated to Whatcom County back in 2007 to be closer to family before we started a family of our own. And our kids were born here, go to public school, and we really enjoy being active members of this great community. Heather and I each serve on the boards of local nonprofits. We volunteer our time, and we try to be as actively engaged as we can in this great place that we all live. A little bit about my experience. I have been practicing law now for over 15 years. I am proud to say that I've always worked for the people in the public sector, whether as a prosecutor, as a tribal staff attorney, or now for the last 10 years at the city of Bellingham, representing the taxpayers of the city on a whole host of complex civil legal issues and providing legal advice to the mayor and the city council and department heads. My experience has earned me ratings of well qualified and qualified from 7 different state and local bar associations to be a Superior Court judge. The reason why I am running for this position is because, as demonstrated by my experience, I am committed to public service and to serving my community. I love Whatcom County and the people who live here, and I'm passionate about justice and doing justice. If I am elected to this important position, I promise that I will apply the law fairly and impartially to the best of my ability every single day, that I will work with stakeholders in and out of the justice system to try to increase access to justice, to reduce some of the inequities in our justice system, and to make sure that the system's a little bit more fair for everyone. I also think it's incredibly important as judges and judicial officers that our judges treat everybody who comes into the courtroom with the dignity and respect that they deserve. And that is my final promise to the voters, that if I'm elected to this position, that's what I will do. I will listen carefully to everyone who comes into the courtroom and do my best to resolve their issues fairly and ultimately to do justice. Thank you very much.
Thank you, James. And Evan, would you like to take on the question, please?
Yes, thank you. So good evening, everyone. And I want to start by complimenting all of you in this group. I was listening pretty intently to what Kevin was saying about the mission statement. And it really does strike me that groups like yours are essential. They educate, encourage us to be involved, challenge our public officials, and that's so important. So, thanks to all of you right off the bat. So, as to me, my name's Evan Jones. I'm running for Whatcom County Superior Court Judge. I grew up in Bellingham, the Columbia neighborhood on Walnut Street. I went to local schools. I graduated from Western, and then I went to live and go to law school on Capitol Hill in Seattle, at Seattle University, and then immediately after returned home here to work as a lawyer. I've worked here my entire career for the people of this community. It's been very important to me. But even before that, in law school, I cared about public service and working for the people. While in law school, I worked for who is now State Supreme Court Justice Gordon MacLeod, and we represented individuals who had been had been convicted of crimes at that point, and were challenging those convictions. We drafted writs of habeas corpus, personal restraint petitions, all sorts of collateral challenges to what we argued were unjust convictions, and did that work, and it was very, very rewarding work. So that was before even returning here home to work as a lawyer. But since my time here, I went immediately to work for the city of Bellingham. I worked for the city attorney's office. I was on the civil side initially, and then moved to criminal work in the municipal court. In the municipal court, I met some of our community's most vulnerable. It was very important experiences for me. These are individuals that find themselves in the municipal court. They're experiencing poverty and homelessness in our community, and being able to work with them and know their experience is something that's never left me in my career since. I moved from the city attorney's office to the county court system. After a few years, I've been in the county court system more or less since then. I worked in district court, moved up into juvenile court, and now in superior court, where I prosecute felony crime. And all of that, while in superior court, I'm a jury trial litigator. I've done countless jury trials. I've been in front of all the current judges, all the clerks. I'm familiar with the court process. And I did want to mention, the other thing I do outside of the courtroom is a teacher. I teach constitutional law at the community college. It's very important to me. It's where I am challenged with new and important ideas to criminal justice. So thank you for the opportunity tonight.
Thanks very much, Evan. Appreciate it. If everyone could please mute their microphones, that would be really appreciated. I'm hearing some things from somewhere in the ether. Thank you. And now we've got Lisa Keeler. Lisa?
Hello, everyone. Again, my name is Lisa Keeler. I'm running for Whatcom County Superior Court Position 2. I am running essentially for 3 reasons. 1, I care about the people behind the cases. 2, I want to be of service to our community. And 3, I have the skills to do the work inside the courtroom and to do strategic work to improve our systems. I, throughout my career, have had the opportunity to do all sorts of different kinds of work. I began at the State Attorney General's office handling child abuse and neglect cases, adult abuse and neglect cases, workers' compensation cases, tax audit cases, the civil side of DUI for the Department of Licensing, doing license revocation and suspension. I hired and trained all of our law clerks out of the Bellingham office for about 6 years. I helped with statewide recruitment and hiring of attorneys. And I took on additional projects. And then I moved into private practice where I've represented businesses and workers. I am the backup prosecutor for the city of Linden. And I was invited to be a commissioner for Whatcom County Superior Court by one of our now retired commissioners. And I've begun arbitrating cases for Whatcom County Superior Court. And most importantly, I've spent years representing individuals. So I know what it's like to represent a governmental agency and a government, but I also know what it's like to hold a client's hand when they're trying to sort out some impact from a criminal case, or they're trying to sort out a water law issue with a neighbor or an organization. I know the people behind the cases. I want to be of service. That has always been my driver. It's why I became a lawyer. It's why I do nonprofit and pro bono work. I have the personality tests to prove that altruism is really my primary motivator as a person. And finally, I have proven ability to do strategic planning work. All starting way back when I was in law school at Gonzaga in Spokane, working with a nonprofit there and with a professional strategic planning individual and sort of learning the ropes of doing that kind of work, to winning a performance award, the highest performance award at the State Attorney General's office for doing strategic planning there. And then recently, just a couple of years ago, with Law Advocates as the board chair, working through a very successful strategic plan and staying committed to them and that mission, which is serving and increasing access to justice. And so again, that's why I'm running. Care for people, wanting to be of service, and having the skills and abilities to do both the day-to-day work of the courtroom, but also to improve access to justice. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. I appreciate that. And Evan, we're gonna have you take on the next question first, and then it will be Lisa, and then James after that. All right. In terms of judicial improvement as Superior Court judge, how can you contribute to improving our system of justice? Are there changes that you believe should be made to Whatcom County or state systems? And what can a judge in the community do to focus more on treating the issues that get law enforcement involved in the first place, like drug and alcohol abuse, psychological problems, poverty, domestic violence, and so on. All of these have really come to the forefront in the last couple of months, I think, much more so than they have in the minds of a lot of people out there. So this was the reason why we wanted to make this the first question, is because we feel it's really at the top of the mind for a lot of people out there. Evan?
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. It's a great question, and that's why, because it's a moment, and we all realize this is a real moment in time to hopefully move the needle, as it were, in a direction that's good for all the people of our society. So it's great that we have the opportunity to think about it and talk about it now. I will say that in my work with the current Superior Court, all of the sitting judges and the ones that have recently left us, like Judge Montoya Lewis, Chuck Snyder, they've all been, in my mind, very sensitive to these issues, and folks that are working hard to make a difference in the way that they can as a Superior Court judge. So great role models there. I don't think there's any one individual that any of us is going to immediately improve upon or be better than. We're gonna use their example, hopefully, and it's a good example. That being said, we do have an opportunity here, and what strikes me as something that the court will be necessarily involved in is having discussions about racial inequities with people in the courtroom more and more frequently, and for good reason. When I practice in trials, we discuss with jurors concepts of implicit bias. We use new jury instructions put forth by the state Supreme Court, and all of that needs to be improved upon and continued. And it's an important thing the judge can facilitate. Also, another thing I've been involved in is the advent of the LEAD program here in our community, and that's a great way. And I know it will be a great way into the future that we kind of head issues off at the pass before they get involved in the court and before we're being reactive. Instead, we can be proactive with some of the drivers of criminality that we see. And the LEAD program allows us to do that. I've been working with the prosecutor's office to implement it, to start. I've been talking to law enforcement about their necessary participation in the program. And I think that's an important thing that can continue to be supported from this position of a judge.
Kevin, you were muted, but I'm assuming you called for me to answer yet next. Okay.
I don't know why I was muted, but sorry, I wasn't burping or anything. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, so the judges can participate. I think it's important to work together with stakeholders and stakeholder ventures to improve systems, not just criminal, but also civil. I think sometimes, understandably so, there's great focus on criminal practice, but most of what the court sees is civil. It's family law, it's protection order matters, it's other civil disputes that come up. When you look at the grand scheme of things. But I think participating in those stakeholder ventures, being open to innovation, to change, to evaluation, and I'm talking about like data-driven evaluation and reevaluation. We've tried different things over the years, and you'll have studies that come out that demonstrate, implicit bias in, say, to, a chart or a method or a tool, you get implicit bias out. So wanting to be innovative. I'm proud to be on the Law Advocates Board, which is a very innovative organization, a statewide leader in access to justice and how we do work. I also think courts need to embrace technology better. We have mental health court in Whatcom County. It's limited to district court. We've got pre-trial services finally. That's kind of a reminder service more so now, but why don't we have that in general? Why don't we just have reminder services? Why don't we have electronic filing? Why don't we have electronic filing statewide? Why do you have to pay for it? You know, when we were beta testing the Odyssey system, it was free in Whatcom County, which means if you work from 8:30 to 4:30 p.m. and can't go to the courthouse, you could find a way to get online. So I think we need to embrace community courts. I think we need to participate in ventures, but also advocate for technological improvement and change, and focus again on both access for everyone and also openness and reevaluation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And James?
Yes, thank you for this question. I think that it's important at the outset to note that this position as a judicial officer is not a policy-making role. And so there are some limitations inherent in what our judges can do to move the needle on these things, but that does not mean that judges are powerless when it comes to this question. So there are three things I think I would like to mention. First, the judge who's retiring, the seat that we are all running for, is Judge Deborah Garrett, and she has been serving for several years on the county's Incarceration Prevention and Reduction Task Force. And if I'm elected to this position, I promise to volunteer to assume her position on that task force and continue its work towards safely reducing and eliminating incarceration in our community. I also want to echo what both Evan and Lisa said about the therapeutic courts we have here in Whatcom County. We do have a therapeutic drug court. We do have a mental health court. And I think it is important that our judges, our prosecutor's office, our defense bar, that they all work together as stakeholders to expand access to both of those courts to make sure that they are serving the broadest population of people possible here in Whatcom County who could be better served through therapeutic court models and get access to the services they need to get well, rather than be cycled in and out of our jail and criminal justice system. And finally, the Supreme Court of Washington recently put out an open letter to the legal community calling on everybody, judges, lawyers, paralegals, clerks, everyone who works in the justice system, to take ownership of their roles historically in perpetuating some of the injustice in the system and working towards eliminating that. And I take that obligation really seriously, and I pledge to do that to the best of my ability.
Thank you. All right, Lisa, we're going to go to you for the next, is my mic on? Yeah, I'm on. We're going to go to you for the next question, which is about social justice. In this, related to recent local and national focus on law enforcement and criminal justice and systemic racism and privilege in our nation, how would you address those issues as a Superior Court judge? And you can respond to this one for 4 minutes, if you like.
Okay, thank you. So a little bit in line with what James said, as a judicial candidate, but also as judges, you know, you can't make pledges or promises about initiatives or how to rule on a case, or it's really important to maintain impartiality. But as he also said, our Supreme Court came out with a challenge to all of us in our legal system to do better. And immediately following that, I, along with a number of other attorneys in our community, showed up at our courthouse steps and made a public pledge to identify and dismantle the racism that permeates our legal system. And I didn't just stop there. I started having conversations with colleagues about what could the Bar Association do? What steps could we make? What else can we do? And in law advocates, we have those conversations. I think it is really important to continue being educated. So I am originally from the Los Angeles area. I lived down there and grew up during the 1992 riots. And that was not the only circumstance of sort of reaction to racism, but specifically those riots in reaction to court cases, 2 court decisions that had come out following incidents of violence, I think about the year prior. And I've seen it. And following those events, I went to the Museum of Tolerance, and we learned about what we now know is implicit bias. And so I think it's really important to constantly be challenging ourselves as judicial officers to say, what are my implicit biases? What do I need to pay attention to and be mindful of? But also to allow data-driven evaluation of what's going on in our courtrooms. That's the whole point, right? It's implicit. You might not see what's going on. And so being open as a judicial officer to someone looking at your work, which is not an easy thing to do, but saying, come tell me if I'm doing something wrong, and keep being educated, and not just for yourself as a judicial officer, but for all the staff who are at the courthouse, to ensure that we are all treating everyone with dignity. We are treating everyone with respect. We are doing our best to create real justice, to try to eliminate inequity in, say, sentencing, or how you're handling family law, dissolutions and the distribution of assets from a marriage, and what's going on there. And so I think it's really important to be very mindful, to be very introspective and challenging of yourself, to open outside evaluation of your work, and again, to keep working with stakeholders on what can we do to improve our system, where are we failing, and that's, again, it's really hard. I always come back to the data. So I'm a fellow of the American Bar Foundation. Membership of the American Bar Association is optional. I've always maintained a membership from law school to present. And certain individuals are invited to be a fellow of the American Bar Foundation to support the work of that foundation, which does research-based, data-driven assessment of legal systems, whether it's you sort of human rights lawyers in China and what's going on there, or what's going on with our criminal justice system. What are the impacts of family law decisions? And so I'm a big proponent of constantly taking a look of what does the data show. I made that pledge to identify and dismantle racism that permeates our legal system. I had follow-up conversations, and I fully intend to honor that pledge, hopefully on the bench. Thank you.
Thank you. James?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for this important question. I think that we have seen over the last few months, particularly, some really extreme examples of the injustice, particularly the racial injustice that permeates our criminal justice system. And I think it is beholden on all of the actors and players in that system to take ownership of their role, as the Supreme Court justices noted, and to do better. We need to organize groups of stakeholders in the system, include leaders of color, and let them lead the way. Because this is not something that is new. This is something that is historic and systemic. And there are leaders in our community and statewide who have the right ideas about what we need to do to move past this system and to rid it of its implicit bias and its institutional bias. And one of the things I think is really important for judges is not just to be fair, but to also have the appearance of fairness and to carry that into the courtroom. And so the community has to decide, who is the most appropriate person to be a judge? What role do we want our judges to play? And when they're making decisions in individual cases about, things such as pretrial release conditions, or a motion to suppress evidence based on alleged police misconduct, or a motion to dismiss even based on alleged prosecutorial misconduct, we need to ask ourselves if we're going to be comfortable with the person sitting on the bench making those decisions. If that person is going to be fair and impartial and also have that appearance of fairness and impartiality. And so I think it's a whole host of issues working together with these people of color and these leaders to follow their example. Mr. Jones spoke earlier about jury selection and discussing implicit bias. Well, in Batson v. Kentucky, the United States Supreme Court case that talked about bias during jury selection and set forth the rule that criminal defendants are entitled to a jury of their peers, and that you cannot strike jurors based on racially motivated reasons. In that opinion, Justice Thurgood Marshall himself wrote that we should eliminate peremptory challenges, because really, if a prosecutor is striking jurors based on peremptory challenges because that juror has not demonstrated they cannot be fair and impartial, with everything we know about implicit bias right now, it is impossible to prove that that is the basis for that decision. So, I think we should work as judges with the Rules Committee and the Superior Court Judges Association to make those types of changes, because those are things that will really make a difference on the ground. And so those are the types of things that I think we can do, and I hope to do if I'm elected as your next judge.
Thank you. Evan?
Okay, thank you, Kevin. So, clear as day, and it's clear as day to me that racial inequity in this criminal justice system and otherwise is a problem. We know that. I know that. I've seen it here in our community. It's not something that happens somewhere else. It happens right here. I did talk about being a trial lawyer, and with respect to Mr. Erb, when I was talking about discussing these issues with jurors, I wasn't talking about Batson. I wasn't talking about the prosecutors being racially motivated, which is a different problem. But what I was talking about is the ability for the court to be involved in picking, in educating potential jurors, and ultimately picking a jury that is fair to anyone who's in the courtroom. And that is such a solemn responsibility, and one that in my experience, the judges are able to really influence and play an important role on. And so those discussions I've had with jurors, what they've highlighted for me is that this is a problem that we face right here. When I talk to jurors, I say, we talk about their experiences as individuals with the system, the participants, the police, the prosecutors, the courtroom, their experiences, and they, to a T, talk about inequities. They talk about two systems. So I believe it. When enough people say it is happening here, it's true, and it needs to be taken care of, and it needs to change. And so I would take the bench with that experience and that perspective, and I think that's what I can do. I also appreciate that I'm not going to be the solution to this problem, and neither are either of these other candidates. I've heard a lot recently about this concept of white saviorism, and I agree that I am not going to be the solution to the problem. I need to stand in solidarity, witness to the problem, and solidarity with those that experience it, and as an ally to fix it. And that's how I would be as a judge, and that's important to me because of my experiences in the courtroom and in the system. As far as what else I could do if elected as a judge, I think being an educator is an important thing that I would bring to this bench. The ability to discuss concepts that are somewhat complex, somewhat data-driven, and somewhat foreign to folks, like implicit bias, like going through jury instructions. My experience as an educator in working through these discussions with groups of people is going to be very important. And I know I will rely on that as a judge, that ability and that skill that I think I have, and I hope I have. I'm also somebody that being very approachable as a person is important to me through all the places I've worked and communities I've been a member of. Being an approachable person is important, and I would continue that as a judge. I wouldn't hide behind the robe. I wouldn't hide in my chambers. I wouldn't hide in any of those ways from this issue or any others, or from the people. I want to be there where we can work, where I can work as an ally to solve this issue, because it needs to be changed. It needs to be fixed.
All right, thank you. All right. But all of you have mentioned bias, and we're going to delve a little bit deeper into that. We've seen numerous examples of police and prosecutors acting in bad faith when prosecuting defendants. It's on the cop shows, but it's in real life too, for sure. We've seen wrongful convictions of defendants who are later proved innocent due to misrepresentation of facts or because prosecutors withheld evidence, exculpatory evidence, or whatever. What can you do as a judge to protect citizens from this kind of injustice? And we'll start with James, and this will be a 2-minute question.
Well, first I want to note that, even in college, I volunteered. My pro bono service project, my 3L year, was with the Innocence Project of Florida that had worked to free an individual who was on death row in Florida who had been wrongly convicted. And so my experience working on these issues, dates back to that time. Bias permeates the system, as we've talked about. And one of the promises that I make to the voters is that when criminal defendants and their attorneys come to court and they file a motion to suppress evidence that has allegedly been wrongfully obtained, maybe the law enforcement has overstepped the rules, they've overstepped the boundaries of a search warrant, or they didn't actually get consent for the search. I pledge to listen to those, to the evidence in that case, and to apply the law with an open mind, and not just be a rubber stamp for law enforcement in those circumstances. And when motions are brought to bear for prosecutorial misconduct that's alleged, for maybe failing to disclose exculpatory evidence, I won't automatically believe that that motion is unfounded or without merit. Instead, I will listen to the evidence that is put on by the defendant and their attorney, and carefully weigh that evidence and apply the law to determine whether it is appropriate to allow that prosecution to move forward, or if that case should be dismissed. And so the point is that I will assume the position, with fairness in mind and an open mind, and we'll work hard to make sure that the rights of all people are always respected, not violated, so that justice can be done. Thank you.
Thank you. Evan, same question.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. It strikes me that as we talked, we started tonight talking about this group, Indivisible Bellingham, and the function it has holding elected officials accountable. It strikes me that a judge has a similar obligation in the courtroom, holding the folks that claim the power in the courtroom, holding them accountable. And that is something a judge does every day and should do, and I would do. With fairness and an open mind, but definitely accountability, because that's the most important way that the judge can influence the rights of individuals in the courtroom, is by a strict adherence to the ethical responsibilities of folks that are representing individuals and folks that are prosecuting individuals, to hold them accountable to their own ethical responsibilities, to hold them accountable to the multitude of rules that come from court rules, but also case law that are necessary and there for a reason, to protect folks' rights. And a judge can instill in his or her courtroom a sense of adherence to those important rules. And in my experience, lawyers respond. They will jump, and they will work hard to do their necessary part in the system. And so I think a judge can influence that, and I definitely would think that's an important part of something I can do. I've taught about Brady v. Maryland. I understand exculpatory evidence. I talk to my students about it, and I talk to law enforcement about it, frankly. And I will recognize it when it needs to be addressed and when accountability needs to be handed down to those that need to uphold it.
Okay, thank you. Lisa, same question.
Thank you. So in my career, I've had the opportunity to sort of see all different sides of the fence myself as well. So I've worked on personal restraint petitions and did that work back in law school in challenging criminal convictions because of failures in process. I have been an assistant attorney general, essentially. There were civil, but essentially prosecuting cases, and been a prosecutor backing up in the city of Linden. I've also, again, held the hand of an individual facing criminal charges on the civil side, because those implications go beyond just the criminal system, but bleed into your employment, all these other aspects of your life. And I know what it's like to have to hold clients accountable, to tell an agency or a client that, no, the rule is this, and this is how we're going to do it. And I am not going to compromise my ethics, and we're going to do it right. And so I think accountability is key, holding those accountable as appropriate under the law for violating the constitutions, for violating statutes, for not following the rules and procedures. And again, I've had to address that, people withholding records, people redacting things that should not have been redacted, and kind of fighting through all of that. And the procedural rules are there for a reason, to have a level playing field. But again, I think it's also about accountability of yourself as the judicial officer. And this is why, again, I talk about evaluation, because we can all talk about trying to do the right thing, but sometimes you don't see it in the moment. So I think it's about holding all the players accountable in the courtroom, enforcing the Constitution, the laws, the rules, but also taking a look at your actual work done and seeing if you need to tweak, and holding yourself accountable as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to pop something to all three of you real quickly about this bias issue. I mean, I know that you are, you're all of your decisions will be based on law, but you've all spoken to how, law is often open to interpretation, and we all harbor implicit biases. What bias or biases do you recognize in yourself that might influence your decisions? And I would just want to go backwards. I'll go with Lisa first.
So I don't know about influencing my decisions. I've sat on the bench and I've been a decision maker, and I haven't seen that play out in my work. I do know that as a person who did hiring at the State Attorney General's office, I had to be kind of mindful, challenging people for coming in for an interview and not dressing like a lawyer, not wearing a suit. And so I had to challenge myself on that bias. I've taken implicit bias tests. I know that maybe it's because of who I grew up with and where I grew up, I had a propensity to think that people of Asian descent were smarter than everyone else. So I've done self-evaluations, and the importance of doing that is to sort of check yourself and then remember, coming back to law and the rules. But like I said before, we all think we're doing it right in the moment, and we can all try. And I think the way to truly evaluate your work is to have someone assess you after the fact, to see what we're really doing in the system, and then tweak if we need to. Okay.
Evan, we'll go to you real quickly.
Sure. So, it's clear that we all come to this with biases of our own. And I think, Ms. Keeler is right that we don't often recognize them in ourselves, and that's a bit of a self-preservation tactic, I'm sure. So I think that for myself, what I would need to be aware of is that I come from this community, and this is the community that I was born and raised in, and that I need to have a perspective that at times might need to be bigger than that. And that's something that I would challenge myself to do, and then to rely on what I know the science is, and what I know the jury, what we are rightfully being educated about, to rely on that and to trust that, and to to check myself and have others check myself as necessary. But to look at the world as a big place, and communities as important things that might be foreign to me because of where I grew up. So I think that would be my bias I would have to confront.
Okay, thank you. James?
I think this is a terrific question, and I would love to identify a solitary bias that I recognize in myself. I think what I have tried to do throughout the course of my career is to learn what those biases are, to challenge myself on those particular biases when they are recognized, and to work to overcome them. I am proud in this campaign to be supported by a broad coalition of folks that represent the diversity of our community. I think that's critically important. And I have worked with those folks and others to recognize those biases and to try to eliminate them as much as possible, so that when I am making decisions, whether those be in a professional capacity or in any other capacity, that I am truly making decisions that are objective and fair.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. All right, we're going to go with, I believe it's Evan's turn the next time to go first. Is that right? I've lost my way here. I think that's right. We'll go with Evan on this one.
Just go with that. Yeah.
We'll go with it. All right. This question is about the jail. There's been a lot of work and a lot of talk about the jail in this town and this county for a long time. Would your Superior Court work have an impact on overcrowding in incarceration facilities, not just here, but also, you know, in other jails? What approach would you support, especially in the time of COVID-19? Should we reach a post-COVID era? Are there lessons from the current time that could be applied to overcrowding in jail issues in the future? And we'll start with Evan. This is a 2-minute question.
Sure, it's a great question. You know, I've been involved over the last several months in the I guess we're called the COVID era with seeing a drastic reduction in the jail population. You know, we've been working with the stakeholders, with the court, with the prosecution, with the defense to reevaluate the standards that land, the standards from the court perspective that land folks in jail, and that I'm talking about, you know, pretrial release decisions, sentencing decisions, all those things that result in, you know, more folks in more beds in the jail. So I've been involved in watching this reduction, and you know what's true is, you know, maybe to all of our surprise, but the sky has not fallen. You know, things have seemingly been in a way, you know, with exceptions, of course, but things have been done in a way that seems responsible and reasonable to community safety and what's important about not locking folks up if we can at all avoid it. So that's been encouraging to me to see that. You know, the other thing that strikes me that's necessary here that I've been involved in is the risk assessment tools that we do pre-trial, that we haven't really started to utilize fully, but the court is involved in that and can be as a judge. Such a tool really requires that the tool itself recognizes biases and avoids putting people in custody unnecessarily. And so we can see more of that and use more of that risk assessment tools. And I'm familiar with several. I also know from the Vera report and other sources that the length of time that folks are waiting to get their trials is a large driver of jail population, and a judge has control over that and can really encourage cases to be brought to trial in a timely way and a responsible way and reduce the population in the jail.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Lisa?
Thank you. I think through COVID, we've seen a lot of reevaluations, as Evan has said, in how and why we detain people. You know, I don't have a huge criminal practice right now, but even then, as a member of the ABA, I think it's the civil rights and justice section, has been putting on lots and lots of different trainings. And so I attended one about COVID and jail specifically, and all of the reevaluations that have taken place, not just here, but across the country, in rethinking, like, why? Just asking those basic questions. Why are we doing what we do just because we've done it forever? And the Vera Foundation and the reports and all, like, those have been coming out for decades upon decades. And so it took a pandemic, I think, to really force actual action in reassessing. And I think courts, again, just need to be open, but also willing to not accept the recommendations of say the prosecutor, or to just go with what one particular attorney is recommending in a case, but sort of to take those important calculated risks on choosing to release someone and what that might mean. And so I think it would be a huge shame to come out of the pandemic and sort of regress, if you will. And I think, again, risk assessment tools, that's, it's great to try all of these things, but don't stop evaluating, because we've seen that with risk assessment tools, that bias in is bias out. So I think the thing that I'm talking about, more important than anything else, is to just not rest on your laurels. Like, don't think that we've solved it just because we've done something. Reassess, reevaluate. Don't be afraid to ask questions. The why, the how, what else can we do? And I think courts can ask those questions, and of course participate as stakeholders, and not be afraid to make the tough decisions when you need to. Thank you.
Thank you. James?
Thank you for the question. A couple of years ago, I ran for a different office. I ran for county prosecutor, and I answered a lot of questions about the Whatcom County Jail and the proposed new jail. And I recall specifically answering a question about, how much can we reduce the jail population by today? And at that time, I answered the question and was met with almost laughter from the crowd and from my opponent when I suggested that we could reduce the jail population safely by maybe 25, 50%. And I was, again, I was derided as it was outlandish. It was fantastical that I could believe such a thing. And yet the COVID-19 crisis has shown us, as Mr. Jones and Ms. Keeler both acknowledged, that we can safely reduce our jail population, that we do still have more people in our jail than need to be there for public safety purposes, that the prosecutor's office is continuing to make recommendations to hold people over pending trial when they are not dangerous to our community. And so I think it is important for judges to adopt transparent risk assessment tools, because judges aren't perfect either. They bring their own biases, as we've been talking about, to the bench. And you want to make sure that those tools that are used to make these decisions more objective about who is or isn't dangerous, that they are not themselves fed with the same type of biased data that it permeates the system. And as was noted, we want to make sure that our judges are not going to be a rubber stamp for the recommendations with respect to pretrial release conditions, bail, or sentencing for the prosecutor's office. We want someone who will be truly fair and independent, sitting on the bench to make those decisions and to do what is really in the best interest of the community.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we have another question. It does involve bail. Your position on bail, do you support abolishment or some kind of mitigation? Is there an alternative that would work as well? Give us your thoughts, and we will start with Lisa Keeler, please.
Thank you. So just again, as a reiteration, making promises, pledges, taking certain positions, you just never know what might come before you as a judicial officer. And the complete change of a system is sometimes something like that. I will say this, again, involvement with the American Bar Foundation has been just so helpful in growing my understanding of what's going on around our country. There is an inherent disparity with bail and bonds, because if you have money, you have money. And if you don't, you don't. And so if your freedom is based solely on whether or not you are a have or a have not, we have an inherent disparity. And so again, asking those questions, and these are questions that have been asked for decades. What alternatives are there? Is it appropriate to try refundable bail, which is something that has been tried in places. We finally have in Whatcom County pre-trial release services. Those are mostly reminder services. Although again, as I mentioned earlier during our discussions, why don't we just have that? Why don't we have reminders? The whole point of bail is to ensure someone shows up. And so if really it's about responsibility, why not try something if there's support for it? And sometimes the appropriate choice is just releasing someone on their promise. And I've done that as a judicial officer. I've gone against the recommendation of a prosecutor and said, I'm sorry, I think the background information that you've shared with me is outdated. I'm going to trust this person to show up again. And so again, I think from the bench, it's about kind of being open and not being afraid to make tough decisions. But as a system in general, I think we can create more options. Why don't we have night court for working defendants? Why don't we try something different if it's about people showing up again? So that really it's not just a system about do you have or do you have not? Thank you.
Thank you. And James, you're up.
Yeah, so the question about abolishing cash bail is quite an interesting one because it should be noted that bail is not required in every case, that judicial officers across Whatcom County release defendants without bail every day. So that does happen, that defendants are released on their own recognizance without posting any bail. That is perfectly allowed. There's no law that says bail must be set. But bail is oftentimes set at the request of the prosecutor's office. And so again, we need to ask ourselves why that continues to happen. And if you want to eliminate cash bail, we need to make sure that the system that replaces cash bail is one where who is making the decision about the people who are going to be held over, even if they had the means to pay bail, that is not going to be set. So, the fundamental question that needs to be asked by judicial officers when they're making these decisions is this defendant going to be a danger to the community if they're let out of jail before they face their trial? As Ms. Keeler noted, we have some kind of minimal systems in place now to provide reminders to criminal defendants so that they don't miss a court date. Oftentimes, bail is set on the belief that someone will miss their court date. And in the 21st century in the United States of America, it is just not reasonable to believe that people are going to flee the jurisdiction and escape, to parts unknown. That is not the way that our society works anymore. I get 3 reminders when I have a dental cleaning coming up so I don't miss it. Why can't we ensure that criminal defendants who may not be as responsible as me, may not wear a tie to the office, that they get a reminder so that they don't miss their court date rather than setting cash bail that we know they can't post. So with that, I'll cede the floor.
Okay, thank you. Evan Jones?
I guess that means I got to take the floor. So
You're gonna take the floor.
Yeah. So I acknowledge that this is a great question and a great discussion to have. On the outset, I want to say a few things. One, this is an area where we need to be wary of making pledges or promises that are interpreted as commitments, because we can't do that and we shouldn't do that. Judicial candidates shouldn't. The second thing I'll say is that abolishing bail is a constitutional guarantee, and it's kind of a different way to think about it. But bail under our state constitution is something that was put there as a constitutional right of defendants to be released and to not be held without bail, which was the problem. So any change in the bail system is going to involve a constitutional change, and I'm not saying that that's not something we need, but it's a very large thing that affects what historically was thought of as rights of individuals to release. So similar to this conversation that we're having. I think what the judges need to effectively operate a bail system or a non-bail system is tools, and pretrial services is one such tool. It's a new one we just got, and it's been mentioned a few times. It's not just reminders. It also gives the judges some assurances that folks aren't getting into more trouble while they're out in the community, because that's another factor in the bail decision is community safety. And so pretrial services serves that function also. And I'll tell you, when that tool became available, we could all go into the courtroom with more confidence that we would have a safe community and that we would have appearance in court, and bail wouldn't be necessary, because we added something. And so any idea of taking something away, we need to add things like pretrial services and more of it, like friendship diversion services, which I've worked with numerous times in Superior Court, and the ability to have GPS monitoring and things that are less restrictive, which is the requirement under the criminal rules. So I support all of that.
Okay, thank you. Lisa Keeler, this next one is for you. Starting out, we believe that putting poor people with problems in jail does really nothing to help the people or the problem. What can the community do, and what can a judge do to focus more on treating the issues that got law enforcement involved in the first place? You know, drug and alcohol abuse, psychological problems, poverty, domestic violence. How could social services, the education, family support, drug rehab, mental health, crime prevention, proactive policing be improved in Whatcom County in the community to help solve some of these problems?
So again, I think from the judiciary, what you can have is buy-in to programming and openness and being willingness to come to the table, to be part of the conversation of, you know, what can we do in the courtroom? And I've certainly worked with law advocates and other organizations to say, hey, this is a program we want to do to support individuals, say like pro se individuals dealing with like debtor issues, but you need the buy-in from the court, you know, to make certain programs work. And so I think that's kind of the most important thing coming from the judiciary. And I would say, just as sort of a general sentiment about society and the universe, you know, I worked on dependency and termination cases, as I mentioned, and when I was working there, return home was still the most successful plan. That is how most of my cases resolved. And I held my social workers accountable to do their job well. But really the people who succeeded were the ones who used, found, or created healthy and positive community. And so that idea of it takes a village to raise a child, it's not just about children. Like, it takes a village for all of us to be healthy and successful. And so, you know, I think there's a lot of policy work that doesn't happen in the judiciary, and the judiciary should be separate about thinking, why do we even have court contact at all? You know, in certain circumstances, and to ask certain questions about what can we be doing differently and how we engage and how we create community, and frankly, how do we treat humans with the inherent dignity that they have, period. In all things that we do, that people come first. And what the judiciary can do is sort of participate, be open, ask the right questions, be innovative, and support in that way. But I also think to kind of advertise what you're doing, to share that you're being active in the community. Thank you.
Thank you. James Erb?
Yeah, I think it's important to know we do have these therapeutic courts right here in Whatcom County. We have a drug court, we have a mental health court. And, you know, I've been around the community. I've spoken to thousands of community members, and I've been fortunate in that experience to speak to people who have graduated from drug court and graduated from mental health court. And these programs, when they're done right, when they're well-staffed and fully funded, they produce tremendous successes. They save lives, they change lives, and we as judges should wholly embrace those models and do the best to make them as successful as possible. But ultimately, that should not be the way that we're delivering services to people in our community who need mental health treatment, who need substance abuse treatment. This question to me is a question about values and what we value as our community. Do we value the people here who need those services enough to invest in those services so that we can avoid these folks being arrested, incarcerated, and put through the criminal justice system when really what they have is a public health issue, or maybe even a public health issue mixed with poverty. And so the only way that those individuals can receive substance abuse treatment is to get arrested for a drug offense. The only way they can receive mental health treatment is to get arrested for a very narrowly defined class of misdemeanor offenses in our community. That is not the way that a community should function. And we need to get together the stakeholders and the policymakers and the budget writers to say, look, we can warehouse people with these problems. We can build bigger jails and prisons and just continue to warehouse folks rather than treating the underlying issues, or we can invest in the type of social services that would promote wellness throughout our community.
Okay, thank you. Evan Jones?
Thank you. This is the most exciting area that I think, because I'm seeing, at least in my experience, a real birth of interest in alternative sentencing programs, and it's great, and people are seeing that it works, and people are buying in and getting invested in real positive change in criminal justice, and I think that is very exciting. I've personally worked in drug court, and I've worked with mental health court in the county, and I personally worked for some time with juvenile drug court, and had significant experiences with successes in that program, all in our county. So I know it works, and I know that it's getting that people are starting to agree on that front, and I think that's a good thing. I guess an additional exciting thing that's happening is the LEAD program that's coming to our community, and folks have been working very hard on making that a reality, and it's an important thing that we need to continue, because as we're going to do this program, it starts before any involvement in the criminal justice system. It involves identifying folks that are high users of the system and need intervention before the carrot and stick starts, before the specter of a criminal conviction is hanging over their head, but in a true, meaningful way, reaching out to folks that we know need help and offering it. And that's what the LEAD program is going to do. I've been doing what I can to help the discussion around that. And I'm excited to see where that goes, and I'm a believer in it.
Okay, thank you. We have another question specifically about the mental health court, and I think you've all mentioned that, the Whatcom County Mental Health Court. Can you tell us a little bit more about it and about how it compares to other mental health courts, especially like one like King County has? And I think this one goes to James.
Yeah, the mental health court exists. It's kind of an adjunct of the district court. And the class of people who can qualify to get into mental health court it's extraordinarily narrow. The enumerated offenses that a person can be charged with to be eligible for mental health court is quite small. And before anyone is admitted, they have to go through a process where they're getting approval from the prosecutor's office and the judge. And they have to not have certain disqualifying offenses, not just that they're charged with that day, but that they've been charged with in the past in order to get into it. So, the mental health court is a good model. Mental health courts can work, provided that they are established, well, that the criteria that we're using to screen people coming into the court is written in a way that allows it to serve the right population of folks in the community, and that it's well resourced, right? You know, you can't have a successful mental health court unless you have the right resources in terms of funds and staffing to make it a success. But we have seen, we have seen some folks go through that program successfully and graduate and kind of stop. It stops recidivism. It stops the types of behaviors that have led them into the criminal justice system in the first place. So I think, I applaud therapeutic courts, whether it's mental health court or drug court. I think we should have more of it. I think they should be better funded. I think they should be better staffed. I think they should be serving a good population. But as I said in my previous answer, I would prefer a system and a community that values people and that provides investments in the social services on the front end so that we can prevent, bringing these people into the court system to begin with.
Thank you. Evan Jones.
Thank you. We all hope for a better society, and we all work in our lives to accomplish that. It's important to me. What the reality is as judges, we're going to see folks that are already there. We're going to see folks that have, for whatever circumstances are, have put them there in squarely in the system. So what do we do? Is the question, I think, and mental health court is a tool that has been just very meaningful to how I, in my practice, have handled cases. I prosecute felonies in Superior Court, and I'm probably one of the most active referral attorneys into mental health court in district court. So although I don't think the class of crimes is as narrow as it might sound, because I take felony crimes every day and make the decision because I think it's the best for the community to refer those cases back down into district court with different charging and into mental health court. So that happens every day, and it can continue to happen. I think it's a good thing. So the program is one. I think it's not different than King County. I understand King County operates their mental health court through district court and their municipal court, and so do we in our community. I think the willingness to broaden our range of crimes that are accessible for that program into felonies, and the ability to bring crimes down when it's appropriate is something that I think is a good thing for the community.
Okay, thank you. Lisa Keeler.
Thank you. Yeah, again, my understanding is that our district court mental health court is pretty similar to what you see in courts, not just in Washington, but around the country. Oftentimes misdemeanors, generally district courts or the equivalent, or municipal courts or the equivalent. I think you can ask those questions. Why not expand programming? Why not try something different? Why not see what you can do to either increase the services, do more co-occurring work? Drug and alcohol and mental health often come together. And some of that does happen in our mental health courts and our drug alcohol courts. But why do we have all these separate programs all the time? Is that the best way to do it? Should we just have a combined sort of therapeutic court system? Should we you're just asking those questions of what would do best. The other thing that I think is really challenging, again, because we all are subject to budgets and funding and things like that, is the danger of picking those cases that you think are going to be successful so that you have successes. And I think kind of being more open to failure in all of that we do, especially things like mental health. I mean, that is cyclical challenges for a lot of people, same with drug and alcohol. And so just kind of making sure that we're challenging ourselves and not just picking the people that that will succeed. And that's not just here. You see that in like innovative cancer treatments. A lot of the studies that people want to do are the ones where they think they're going to have the most success so they can get more funding down the line. And I think just rethinking that, why is that our motivator instead of just attending to what the needs of the community are, and being open to what else could be out there. I mean, we've got successful homelessness courts around the country. I think San Diego was the first, just being open to all the possibilities. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. That concludes our questions, and I don't think we have any questions from our studio audience. So I'd like to thank each and every one of you for your time and your excellent answers. This is going to be an extremely difficult decision to make, I think, for most of us. I'd like to thank you very much for being here, and I'd like to remind everybody that this video will be posted at some point, hopefully by this weekend, on indivisiblebellingham.org. And I'd like to bid all of you thanks and good night.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you.
You bet.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in.